All right, so are we ready to hit the linguistic highway?
Yeah, let's go.
I'm excited for this deep dive. We're going to be talking all about the language of road trips today,
Right.
going way beyond just your basic phrases, Like, we're not just going to be talking about, how to ask for directions
Mhm.
or book a hotel room or something like that.
Right.
We really want to help our listeners sound natural
Hmm.
and fluent when they're out there talking about hitting the open road.
Absolutely.
Really capturing that road trip spirit
Yeah,
in their language.
you got it.
And
And you know what I think is so fascinating about this topic
mhm.
is that it's not just about knowing the words.
Right.
Like you were saying, it's about how you use them.
Exactly.
It's about reflecting the experience,
Yeah.
the road trip experience, through the way you speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that really jumped out at me from all these sources we've been looking at
Hmm.
is how often native speakers use these road trip phrases
Yeah.
metaphorically,
Oh, yeah.
even when they're not actually on a road trip.
It's a great observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show how these phrases have become so ingrained in our culture.
Yes. Yeah.
They're not just limited to the open road anymore.
Right. Right. They pop up everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Like, for example, pit stop.
Oh, yeah, pit stop.
So we all know what that means on a road trip, right? You stop for gas,
Right. Bathroom break.
bathroom break, grab some snacks.
Yeah, got to get those munchies.
Oh, yeah, gotta have those munchies.
Absolutely.
But one of the sources pointed out
Yeah.
that native speakers often use pit stop to
Mhm.
describe any quick stop,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
even in everyday life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like let's say you're on your way to a meeting, but you need to grab a coffee.
right.
You might say something like,
Yeah.
hey, let's make a quick pit stop at the coffee shop before we head over.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like you're bringing a little bit of that road trip energy
Yes.
into everyday situations.
It's so true.
Yeah, it's
It's like a little linguistic souvenir
Uh-huh.
from the open road.
Yeah, it is.
So how can our listener use this to sound more natural?
I think the key is to really pay attention to how native speakers use these phrases
Okay.
in different situations. And don't be afraid to experiment a little,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Now, another phrase that I thought was really interesting
Hmm.
was, we've got all our bases covered,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
which basically means you're fully prepared for something.
You got it.
Right.
Yep.
Like you've thought of everything.
Yeah, and this one is interesting because it goes way beyond road trips.
Right.
This is a phrase you can use in any situation where you want to project confidence
Yes.
and preparedness. Like imagine you're giving a presentation at work
Oh, yeah.
and you want to reassure your audience you've got everything under control,
Hmm.
say we've got all our bases covered, can really make you sound more
Oh, yeah, for sure.
competent and in charge.
Like you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
That's like saying, bring it on, I'm ready.
Haha. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's the power of understanding these nuances of language.
Absolutely.
It can really make a difference.
It's not just about memorizing phrases.
Right.
It's about knowing how to use them
Yeah,
in different contexts.
absolutely. It's about thinking beyond the literal meaning and understanding how language can be used to convey all sorts of different messages,
That's so true.
right?
So we've talked about pit stop, and we've got all our bases covered.
Yeah.
What other gems did you uncover in all these sources?
One thing that really stood out to me was how native speakers use variations of common road trip phrases,
Okay.
just to add a little bit of personality and style to their language.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah?
Like it's like those little spices that take a dish from bland to amazing.
Exactly.
Okay, give me an example.
Okay, so take the phrase, let's get going, for example. It's a pretty simple, straightforward way to say it's time to hit the road right.
Yeah.
But native speakers might also say, let's get rolling, or let's hit it.
Yeah, but I feel like let's hit it would sound a bit odd in some situations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to say that in a formal business meeting.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd sound a little crazy.
Haha, exactly. It's all about context.
Right.
Let's hit it is great with friends.
Yeah.
But in a more formal setting, it might come across as a little too casual.
Right.
So you got to be mindful of your audience.
So how can our listener figure out
Yeah.
when to use these variations?
That's a great question.
Because it seems like there's a fine line between sounding cool and confident
Yeah.
and sounding a little bit off,
You got it. Yeah. I think the best way is to really listen to how native speakers use these variations in different situations.
Okay.
Pay attention to the tone of voice, the body language, the overall context. And the more you expose yourself to authentic language, the better you'll become at recognizing those subtle nuances.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like anything else, the more you practice, the better you get.
Absolutely.
So speaking of practice, maybe we should take a little detour
Ooh, I like detours.
and explore some of these variations in more detail.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm all for a good detour. That's often where we discover the most interesting things.
All right, so let's hit it.
Let's go.
Okay, so we're back on the road exploring all these variations on those classic road trip phrases.
Yeah, they're so much fun.
And you know what really struck me is like
Oh, that's
each
okay.
variation has its own personality, its own little vibe.
It's true. It's like they paint different pictures in our mind,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like let's get rolling, for example.
Uh-huh.
It just gives you this sense of momentum, like you're already on the move.
I know. Yeah, it does. And let's hit it feels more spontaneous.
Yes, exactly like a sudden burst of energy.
Yeah.
It's like choosing the right soundtrack for your road trip.
I love that.
You know, each phrase sets a different tone.
So how do you know which one to use?
That's the big question.
Yeah, like do native speakers consciously choose or is it more of a gut feeling?
I think it's a little bit of both,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay.
There are definitely some guidelines, like we talked about, the formality of the situation.
Right.
But ultimately, a lot of it just comes down to feeling comfortable with the language.
Okay.
You know, finding the phrases that resonate with you and using them in a way that feels natural.
Makes sense. You don't want to sound like you're trying too hard
Exactly.
or using phrases that just feel forced.
Yeah, it should flow, you know?
It should be authentic.
Exactly. It's about owning your language and expressing yourself authentically.
So we've been talking about variations of let's get going.
Right.
What other phrases can we play around with like this?
Well, our sources also pointed out some interesting variations for "Are we ready to go?"
Okay.
And it's amazing how just a simple shift to "So are we all ready to go?"
Uh-huh.
can make a world of difference.
You know, I never really thought about that before, but you're right. It does sound more natural.
Adding "so" and "all"
Yeah.
just makes it sound so much smoother,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does.
It's like it mimics that natural rhythm and flow of everyday speech.
Mm-hmm.
Native speakers often use those little fillers without even realizing it.
It's like a secret code for
Yeah.
sounding more fluent.
Exactly.
I like it. And what about swapping out "it is ready" for "it's all set"?
Oh, that's another great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of saying "the car is ready," you could say "the car's all set."
Oh, I like that.
Right. And again, these small changes might seem insignificant,
Mm-hmm.
but they really signal to others that you're not just speaking English.
Yeah.
You're comfortable with it.
It's like you're speaking the language of the road,
Yes,
not just translating from a textbook.
that's a great way to put it.
And speaking of the language of the road,
Yeah.
our sources also touched on some fascinating regional differences in road trip lingo.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, language is always evolving and adapting.
Right?
Right. Like, did you know that in some parts of the U.S., people might say, "let's roll,"
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
instead of "let's get going"?
Yeah.
It's really interesting how these regional variations pop up.
It is, yeah. And I mean, I think I was reading that in some areas you might hear folks use y'all a lot on road trips.
Oh, yeah. Y'all is a classic Southernism.
Right. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So it's like each region has its own dialect,
Yeah.
its own little flavor of road trip talk.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes language so fascinating, you know? It's not just about communicating information.
Right.
It's about reflecting our identities and our experiences.
Yeah, and how can our listener tap into these regional differences?
That's a good question.
I mean, short of taking a cross-country road trip.
Uh-huh. Right. Well, one great way is through media.
Oh, okay.
You know, movies, TV shows, even music can give you a glimpse into how language is used in different parts of the country.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because I remember watching a movie
Yeah.
that was set in the South,
Uh-huh.
and I was surprised by how much slang I picked up just from listening to the characters talk.
Exactly. It's like a crash course in regional dialect.
Yeah, it is. It's so cool.
Oh, so fun.
So we've got variations, we've got regionalisms.
Mm-hmm.
What else makes road trip language unique?
Well, we can't forget about slang and idioms.
Oh, yes.
Those are like the spice rack of any language.
I know, they're so fun.
You know,
They are.
they add so much flavor and personality.
And road trip language is full of them.
Oh, it is.
It's like backseat driver
Oh, yeah, a classic.
for someone who's always giving unwanted advice.
Exactly. It perfectly captures that feeling of having someone looking over your shoulder,
I know, it's so annoying.
even if you're the one behind the wheel.
Right, and then there's hit the road,
Uh-huh.
which of course doesn't literally mean punching the pavement.
Right.
It just means to start your journey.
Exactly.
But it's such a vivid image.
It is. Yeah, it's like you're physically striking the road to get it moving.
And that's the power of idioms.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They take these complex ideas
Yeah.
and condense them into these short, memorable phrases.
It's like they pack a whole story into just a few words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of stories, I think it's important to remember that the best way to learn any language is to hear it being used in context.
Mm-hmm.
Road trips are full of stories,
They are.
whether it's sharing memories, telling jokes,
Uh-huh.
or simply describing the scenery.
It's true.
So it's not just about memorizing a list of phrases.
Yeah.
It's about experiencing the language in action, hearing how it flows and adapts to different situations.
Thinking about all these different layers of road trip language,
Yeah,
it really is like taking a journey,
it is.
you know?
It
You
is.
start with the basics, and then you explore different routes, and you discover hidden gems along the way, and ultimately you find your own voice.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It is.
Yeah. And just like on a road trip, the journey itself is just as important as the destination,
I love that. Yeah, it's about embracing the process, enjoying the ride, and not being afraid to get a little lost along the way.
Absolutely.
Speaking of getting lost,
Uh-oh.
maybe we should take a little detour to recharge our batteries
Haha.
before we hit the final stretch of our deep dive.
Yeah, I could use a little pit stop myself.
Okay, so we are back. And man, I'm telling you, going through all these sources about road trip language,
Yeah,
it has been a journey.
it has.
But you know what? One thing that really struck me
What's that?
is that it's not just about, speaking English correctly when it comes to road trips.
It's more than that.
It's about speaking with confidence,
Yes.
with that kind of easygoing, natural flow that makes you sound like you've been cruising the linguistic highway
I like that.
your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about finding that groove.
You've hit the nail on the head, and I think that confidence comes from truly understanding the nuances of this language,
Absolutely.
Like all the things we've been talking about, the subtle variations, the slang, all that stuff.
It all adds up.
It does. It's like once you have that toolkit of phrases and expressions, you can relax and just enjoy the conversation.
You're not translating in your head anymore. You're just expressing yourself authentically.
It's like a seasoned road tripper
Yes.
sharing stories around a campfire.
I love that analogy.
Me too.
Yeah.
So for our listener out there
Yeah.
who's thinking, okay, I want to be able to talk about road trips like that. What's the roadmap? How do they get there?
Well, first of all, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone hits a few potholes.
You're going to stall out a couple times.
Exactly. You're not going to be a master navigator overnight. But those mistakes are valuable, They're learning opportunities.
Yeah, they are like those unexpected detours that lead to the best adventures.
Sometimes the best discoveries happen when you get a little lost.
So true. And remember, practice makes perfect.
Absolutely.
Or at least it gets you a lot closer to sounding like a native speaker.
It does. And don't be shy about using those new phrases and variations.
Yeah.
Even if it feels a little awkward at first.
It will at first.
It will.
Yeah.
But the more you use them, the more natural they'll become.
It's like breaking in a new pair of driving shoes.
I like that.
At first, they feel a little stiff.
Yeah.
But then after a while, they mold to your feet, and they become the most comfortable shoes you own.
That's a great way to think about it.
So practice, embrace those mistakes.
Yep.
What else?
Well, immersion is key.
Okay.
Surround yourself with the language of the road.
So how do you do that?
Watch movies and TV shows that are set on road trips.
Okay.
Listen to music with road trip themes. Read books about epic journeys.
Oh, yeah, like create your own personal road trip language boot camp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more you immerse yourself, the more naturally those phrases and rhythms will start to flow.
So as we reach the end of our deep dive here, I have one final question for our listener.
Okay, shoot.
Now that you've got all this amazing road trip lingo in your back pocket, where would your dream road trip take you?
Ooh, good question.
What scenic highways would you cruise down? What roadside diners would you stop at?
What kind of adventures would you have?
What stories would you share along the way?
Imagine yourself using all these phrases, these little pieces of linguistic magic to connect with people.
Yeah.
Share experiences.
Yeah.
Create memories that will last a lifetime.
That's the beauty of language.
It is.
It opens up a world of possibilities.
It really does.
So buckle up
Hit the road.
and let the adventure begin.
I love it.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the language of road trips.
That was fun.
We hope you found it insightful and entertaining.
And maybe even a little inspiring.
And maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, happy travels.
Yeah. Happy travels.
Both on the road.
And in the world of language.
Yeah.